G'day. I'm going to do a review on the Toyo AT2 open country all-terrain tyres. And why am I going to do a review? Well, I've been running them for a few thousand kilometres now, about 15,000 actually, and I thought you guys might be interested to know what me, as a professional four-wheel driver, think of these tyres. Now, I want to say straight up front, there is no sponsorship deal going on here. I bought these tyres at the same price you'd buy them for. Okay, so nobody's sponsoring me for tyres. That's their business. I guess they're happy with making the coin out of me, but so be it. You're going to get to find out what I truly, honestly, really do think of these Toyo AT2 tyres. Now, that just as a general picture, if you're starting to research and want to understand what these tyres are for, they're an all-terrain tyre. Now, what that means is that they're a tyre that's kind of crossover between bitumen roads and full mud, rocks and really hardcore four-wheel driving roads. They're a middle-of-the-road type tyre, hence all-terrain. And they actually do the job pretty well, all things considered. So I got myself some notes here so that I can make sure I give you all of my thoughts and so on and so forth. Now, one of the things that happened for me early on with these tyres, and this wasn't actually a problem with the tyre, but I want to tell you now so you don't get caught the way I got caught. Now, I've always tended to run on this vehicle, which weighs in at about 3 metric tons, so it's reasonably heavy. On this vehicle, I've always found that about 24 PSI is a good starting pressure for when I'm off-road. But I could always go down to around about 20, 22 PSI if I really wanted some high traction. And I never had any issues with tyres getting cut or coming off the bead or any problems like that. So I followed those principles when I put the AT2 onto the four-wheel drive. But I had a problem when I went out on a particular trip, which was full on. We're talking big rocks, big steep climbs, winching, a bit of mud, a bit of clay. It was all on this track. So I had aired down to around about 20 PSI on these tyres, and they were bellying out really well. And this is where I actually had a problem. Because of the bellying, the section of the sidewall down here, if you flip the tyre up just so you can see in the video, this section here became very exposed to the road surface. What happened for me was I was going down a little two-wheel track to the campsite, going through a creek, and on the approach into the creek there was a bit of rock sticking out from the side of the track, and the sidewall of the tyre hit that bit of rock and it clean cut right through there, absolutely destroying the brand new tyre. I mean, I'm talking, these tyres had probably 2,000 Ks on them. I'm like, no. I literally went to the tyre shop on the Monday and said, throw it in a bin, and I bought another tyre. Couldn't believe it. The reason it happened is I think that these sidewalls are very soft and supple. It's not that they're weak, it's just that their design is such that they will not tolerate that low pressure off-road. So what I've been doing since that day is running about 28 PSI as my start point when I'm going off-road. And since then, I've not had any issues at all. And I've been into the similar country. I've actually done that same track, but I avoided the rock altogether this time, okay? But I've had no issues with those sidewalls getting cut or exposed. Now, the other issue I had, and again, I don't believe this is an issue with the tyre. It came down to me learning how to operate these tyres, and that was on the other front tyre. I was going through a muddy bog hole area. There wasn't water in it, but it was muddy and slippery and slimy. I don't like going through mud because it always does my wheel bearings and brakes no favours. So I was trying to sit on the high side of the wheel ruts, which was all great until I got towards the end and she slid into the ruts, and that other side tyre hit the embankment. And because I was aired down, I actually popped the bead a little bit, let a puff of air out, filled this area here with some dirt and mud. It still held air, and I was able to drive into town and get the tyre taken off the wheel, cleaned up, put back on, and it's still running over there now. Absolutely fine. So that's been my experience with the tyres thus far, but let's delve into it a little bit deeper. Now, if you're finding this information is helpful to you, I would love to hear some of your comments. Have you had these sorts of sidewall slashes or bead pop issues due to a change in pressure requirements in your four-wheel drive? I'd love to know. Put your comments down below, and if you're loving what I'm saying now and you're finding it helpful and you'd like more great content and reviews and four-wheel drive tips and tricks, hit that subscribe button down there, and I'm going to be there's so many videos on here that are just going to help you with your off-road experience. All right, so moving in a little bit further. My first impressions, which was naturally when I drove it out of the tyre shop, this is quiet. Keeping in mind I've been running mud type tyres, so big chunky tyres for years. It was quiet and the vehicle rolled easily. Now I didn't notice a fuel consumption improvement or anything like that, but it's a petrol 80 series Land Cruiser. Fuel consumption and these things are just two words we don't put in the same sentence, but it definitely felt like the vehicle was easier to roll down the road, and that just comes down to the fact I'm not turning big chunks of rubber and so on, which is what generates the noise and heat in a tyre. So that was my first impression, was it's quiet, it's smooth, it rolls easily. I'd be interested to know if you think the same. Put your thoughts down in the comments there below. Now, across some of the main trail surfaces that we would tend to use them on, and I've pretty much done every surface now: sand, mud, rocks, shale, loaded, unloaded, towing. I've done all of those surfaces a number of times and really feel like I've developed a knowledge of how these tyres handle. So let's start with sand. They work really well. You know how I talked about being able to air them down and exposing a lot of sidewall? Well, in sand, you really don't run much risk of cutting a sidewall unless you were unlucky enough in the high tide debris to find something, but I avoid that stuff anyway, just because you don't know what's hiding in the debris. But just sand in and of itself, that's not going to hurt the tyre, so it actually gives you a nice big belly on the sand, therefore you float easier, therefore you can do the sand work really well. So I found on sand, they've worked really good. Again, not being a mud tyre, that helps in sand. If you've got power, I don't find that mud tyres are a bad tyre for sand work at all. They still do a great job on there. I mentioned earlier I've since used these in rocky terrain. Well, I'm filming this in Australia, it's where I live, and there's a place south of here called Victorian High Country. It is one of the most beautiful places to go four-wheel driving. In Australia we call them big mountains. I know the rest of the world would probably call them little hills, but hey, it's what best we've got. It's our highest mountain is down there, Mount Kosciuszko, but that country is really quite steep. And for any vehicle we're talking steep. Okay, we're talking about shaly type of rock, and we're talking about rock and terrain that really can cut up your tyres. We're talking about clay as well, so very slippery if it gets wet. And on these tyres, I've done 2 trips down there in the last sort of 6 months, and really given them a bit of a hiding. Some of the operation I did down there was, it wasn't rally driving, but it kind of was. Okay, if you get my drift, I was giving her a bit of stick. I was travelling trails at a fairly high speed, cornering, and some of these trails have got reasonable size, we call them gibbers, but rocks and stuff, sort of that sort of size. And some of those are sharp rocks and that. I was expecting when I get out of the vehicle after having done, maybe 20 or 30 kilometres of that sort of terrain, I'm expecting to get out of the vehicle and find that these tyres are cut up pretty bad. To be honest, I didn't really even notice any chipping. maybe a few little slices and that, but they wore out by the trip, on the trip home. Basically, the tyres tolerated that sort of environment and harsh treatment without a concern. And that was impressive to me. What's more, in that sort of environment, it felt sure-footed. It felt like it was just locking into that road surface and hooking in, and gave me the confidence to power into a corner and have traction. There wasn't I've had other tyres where mid-turn, for example, you're going around a turn, mid-turn, all of a sudden the tyre kind of lets go because the traction surface changes and the tyre doesn't know how to adapt to it. I've not found that issue with these. Also, I haven't found that the tread feels like it's squirming under the tyre, especially when I'm aired down on those sort of terrains. Other tyres, I've felt like you can feel the vehicle sort of being a little bit like jelly on the surface, but these tyres, again, they seem to be really firm. You can tell I'm actually I'm quite a fan of the tyre, all right, but I am. Now, if you're finding what I'm saying here helpful, or you disagree, put it in the comments below. And if you're loving what I'm saying, hey, hit that subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. All right, let's have a look here. So we've covered off that sharp, shaly sort of rock. Now, what about rock crawling? Okay, it's not a rock crawler. I get that, but I do go and do some pretty decent rock work where we're climbing sandstone's the predominant rock in my area, and these tyres, because they're an all-terrain, they've got literally a lot of rubber to contact the rock. Do they work well in that terrain? Absolutely, they do. They really hook in and give me a lot of traction and a lot of bite, especially when I air down. But like I was saying earlier, I'm only airing down to about 28 psi, even when I'm looking to go reasonably hard into the rocks. That sort of pressure seems to be about right for my vehicle. Keeping in mind, again, I've got a fairly heavy vehicle, so I've got a lot of weight to compress a tyre at that psi range. One thing I have noticed, sometimes when I'm in those environments, you need to wheel spin a bit on the rock to get a bit of heat into the tread. Not that these are a sticky tyre, as in the compound doesn't go to a sticky substance when you heat them up, but any tyre, pretty much, if you give it a bit of wheel spin, it will soften and give you another level of traction. And I have found that tends to chop off these leading edges on the lugs, so these lugs here aren't as sharp as they once were. It actually does, in actual fact, to give you a bit more traction because there's more rubber contacting the road, but they have chewed away in that environment. Is it a negative? No, I'm using the tyres pretty harsh in that environment. They're putting up with the pain. So we've covered off sand. Yeah, they work great. Rocks, yep, they're grippy, and shale and sharp terrain like the high country I talked about, they're working really well there. What about in mud? Well, as long as you keep a few revs up and keep them cleaning out, they actually do grip pretty good in mud. They're not a mud tyre. No, they're not. But they don't do too bad for an all-terrain tyre. So that's about all I'd say on the mud, and I have actually done some pretty decent mud with them. What about the wear? So out of the factory, these come in this size tyre, which is a 285 75/16, or basically a 33-inch tyre, 13.1 millimetres. Now I've measured these at 11.5 millimetres, and I'm saying I've done around about between 15 and 20,000 kilometres, and I've only lost that much rubber off the tyre. Now, I'm not measuring it the same way the factory does. I don't know how they measure them exactly, but hey, they're wearing pretty darn good. When I was looking to buy them, they reckoned that you'd get about 80,000 kilometres, depending. I reckon I'm probably on the money, heading towards that 80,000 kilometres. So time will tell, but so far, that's what I've found so far. Now, I'm just going to wrap this up. What do I think of these tyres? Well, you can obviously tell that I'm pretty happy with them. I've had some negative experiences, and I honestly had to look at myself honestly and say, well, can I blame the tyre because I wanted to? No. When that sidewall got cut, I honestly don't blame the tyre. I think most tyres, barring some absolutely hardcore serious off-road tyre, would probably have cut on that rock. It was literally like a knife edge. So I'm just choosing not to blame the tyre. Keeping in mind this is an honest review. I bought these tyres, so there's no axe to grind. Put it this way, my son's just got his first car. He got his licence the other day. He went out and he's bought a set of those on my recommendation. So my family's running 2 sets of those now, and I have had conversations with another major tyre brand who wanted to give us a sharp deal. Their deal still didn't cut the mustard and didn't even push us towards their tyre, which is a name brand tyre. If I mentioned it, you would definitely know it. So I hope this has been really helpful to you. Put your comments down below. Hit that share button as well. Let your friends know about what you're thinking. If you buy these tyres, I'd love to get a feedback in the comments below. Come back to this video later on. Hit that subscribe button as well. And if you have a product that you would like my opinion on, well, shoot me an email at MadMatt at madmatt4wd.com.au. I'm MadMatt. Stay safe on the trail.